Hey, if you're stuck with nervous system dysregulation, this video is going to be a really important one for you. So, nervous system healing, here's what it takes. My name is Rochelle Walsh, and I'm a complex trauma therapist. I have been for over 2 decades, and I have a lot of advanced training in brain-based strategies. So, when I talk about nervous system dysregulation, that might not be a term you're used to at all. You might say burnout, overwhelm, chronic stress, anxiety, but really, like when that fight or flight is turned on and is stuck in the on position, it really wreaks havoc on our brain, mind, body. And so I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about why it's such a maddening thing for people to try to fix, because oftentimes the women I work with are really self-reliant and they have been working really hard. So they're not the ones that would just want to lay back, take a magic pill and think that it's going to go away, but they really have been trying to fix this. Or maybe if they have been, given something to be able to fix it, they know that that's might help with some of the symptoms, but they don't, it's not fixing the problem. So I'm speaking to you if that's you. This is something that's really important to understand. So I think why a lot of people get stuck is that there are really different drivers to this alarm system that is the stress response, right? There's physical, there's emotional, there's psychological or cognitive, and then there are behavioral. And usually what I see when people come in is that they have been given one approach, and maybe they're doing really good things, but it's not enough because there's all these drivers and they don't have an approach that's working on all these drivers. So let's talk about these different drivers and the 4 drivers, and talk about things that might be helpful and what might be missing from getting really to a place where you can live free from chronic stress. Now, if you don't know, chronic stress is the #1 predictor of premature death and disease, according to, people much smarter than me in the physical health space. So it's important because when our nervous system is not functioning well, nervous system dysregulation or chronic stress, fight or flight, is an inflammatory response. So that affects not only our mind, not only our emotions, but also our physical body. And so the longer it goes on, the more far-reaching impact it has. So the first driver let's talk about is physical, because a lot of times people will be doing all the physical things. So maybe they try to manage their stress, they try to exercise, they've learned that maybe if they cut out certain inflammatory foods or cut out caffeine or eat better or take supplements, that those things help. Maybe they're taking Epsom salt baths. All of those things are excellent. I recommend, all of those things. My husband practices functional medicines. I have a very holistic approach to stress, and I understand that those things are very important. Maybe they're getting treated for migraines or headaches, or they're trying to get massages, or they're trying to heal their gut. Again, all very good things, because there are physical drivers that impact our stress response. So some of those physical drivers can be toxins in our environment, toxins in our food, too much blue light, too much activity, too much outward stimulation. So definitely there are things in our environment and in our physical world and our physical body that impact our stress response. And so it is important to manage those things and to do what we can to overcome those. Why then doesn't it fix the problem? And so that is because, again, with all of these things we talk about, you can address one driver, but if you have another driver for this nervous system dysregulation, you're not going to be getting to the root of the issue. So even with somatic experience, and so people will say, well, I do certain poses or certain things to help release stored survival stress. That's great. But what about the new way of processing stress as it comes in, right? Because we can work on relieving past stress, we can somatically track and those sorts of things, but we have to be addressing these other areas as well. So the second driver is emotional. And by emotional, I mean is that, we will hear in talk therapy, you have to feel it to heal it. And, we know that people benefit so much from validation, from being able to have someone really hear their experience, connect to them, and validate their experience, because a lot of people had experiences that were very difficult and no one was there to really help them through the emotions of that. And so that experience is still kind of locked in as really overwhelming, and those emotions are stored in the brain and the body. And so it's really important to be able to have a new template for emotional regulation. So not only can I experience the emotions from the past safely without being triggered into a state of overwhelm or being, having a PTSD like response, but do I now have a way of responding and managing my own emotions that allows me to not have this stress response? So one of the things in the subconscious part of the brain, these areas of the brain that we're not even aware of a lot of times, emotions can be triggering. So people become very hyper vigilant, attending to things in their environment and other people and how they're perceiving things, because emotionally they don't want to be overwhelmed by the emotions that come up. So if we don't work to help people regulate emotionally, they will forever be hyper vigilant, trying to control the things in their environment so that they don't get emotionally overwhelmed, because emotionally it just feels like a tsunami. So one of the things with emotional drivers for chronic stress is that people might feel safe in their therapist's office and they might get help with that, or, with a spouse or a friend, but internally they have a hard time attuning to their own emotions. So again, if we don't go in and give the person, healthy emotional regulation strategies, then they become very attuned to everything on the outside. So that if everything's okay and everything's predictable and I'm doing everything right and other people then I'll feel okay. But there's still subconsciously, things happen and emotions come up. If those emotions turn on a stress response, then we're going to be stuck, right? No matter how many massages we're getting, no matter how many vacations we're taking, we're going to be stuck. The fourth driver is psychological or cognitive. And what I'm talking about there is these subconscious belief patterns, like maybe I have to achieve to feel worthy, even if I know that's not true, or I should be able to take care of everything, or I shouldn't need anyone, or it's not safe to relax, or I have to be busy, or I am whatever, fill in the blank, like I'm not good enough, I have to be perfect, I can't fail, I must do everything right, I can't disappoint anyone, I should make everybody happy all the time. Those are those core beliefs. Now here's where core beliefs, we can go in and say, okay, they're psychological drivers. Most of us can identify those. Although I'll say, because they're in the subconscious, we will if we do this work, you're always going to be finding more, right? And that's just growth. And the women I work with, and I consider myself a very growth-minded person, so I'm never going to stop learning. I'm never going to stop growing. It's not like I'm going to reach this place and go, oh, no more new learning to do. I'm always going to be learning. Most of the women I work with are like this too, and men, I would say the men I work with are like this too, not meaning to exclude the men because they're growth-minded too. But what that means is that there's a lot of subconscious beliefs. There's a lot of subconscious drivers that lead our stress response. What does our bottom brain, as we filter information, what's happening, what meaning are we attaching to it, right? What meaning is attached to it based on our past experience? But the problem here is people will try to overcome mindset issues by listening to podcasts, by talking about it, by thinking about it. But those things are locked in our subconscious until we can do the calming. So if we can't do the calming, if we can't calm ourselves down physically, and we're stuck in this perpetual motion, mind racing, right? Our mind is racing. We know that because it's like, I can't shut off the hamster wheel. I feel this restlessness. I always should be doing more, achieving more, fixing something. It's not okay. Or we have emotional responses that are, again, held in our body. We try to do that from a state of overwhelm. These core programs just stay kind of locked in place because their job is to protect us. So if we can't work on relaxing through the body, it's going to be very difficult to change these core beliefs. So that's super important to remember. And then the last is behavioral. So there are things that we do, there are ways that we practice a stress response that are kind of embedded into our daily behaviors that are on autopilot. How do we make decisions? Do we procrastinate a lot? Are we always in a rush? Are we always taking on more? What are our habits around sleep? Our habits around eating? So behaviorally, we can be doing things just by the way we hold our posture and the way we move about our day that are activating a stress response. So If we work really hard on mindset, but behaviorally, we're still practicing things that activate that stress response, we're going to be stuck. So, what I am saying here is that there are multiple aspects to nervous system regulation. And that's why it can be so frustrating for people who have read a lot, learned a lot, leaning into their faith, trying to practice good self care, and they can get discouraged. And then they fall into this thing where it's tempting to believe, well, it's just mere perimenopause. It's just because of the time in my life. No, it's not. And I'm not saying hormones don't impact that. I'm saying it's not the only reason. There are many women in perimenopause who are not saddled with a chronic stress response. And I help. Most of the women that I help are, in some age where hormonal fluctuations are part of life and they can exacerbate what's going on, but they're not the only reason. They're not the only thing that creates it. So, hormone replacement can be helpful in some situations, but most of the women I help, it is not the only driver of the stress response. So it's not the only solution. So people get frustrated because they've tried one thing after another. So what I would say is it's really important to do the right things in the right order. And I'm going to talk to you about the right order. Of course, I do have a program that helps women through this, but regardless of whether or not that's through my protocols, like the stuff is these are not, this is not just my opinion. This is based by like how our brain and nervous system works. And the first thing is that you really do have to calm. You do really have to learn to be still. And I'm a Christian, and I think the be still and know that I'm God is huge, because most of the women I work with have very strong faith. It's not a lack of faith. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's not a lack of intention. They just have a very physiological chronic nervous system dysregulation. This is a physiological issue. So calming that is super important. Getting to a place where you can feel still in your body should come before working on the mindset. Working on the mindset without having strategies to really help you calm the nervous system is the hard way. And that's because when we calm through the body, we're working on that lower region of the brain. It processes information a million times faster. And when the stress response is activated, it cuts off, not cuts off entirely, but definitely impedes, the processing of our prefrontal cortex, which is why people start to get things like memory issues, brain fog. I'm not processing things the way I used to. I can't keep track of things. It's harder to make decisions, those sort of things. If we address being able to get calm and still in the body, there's all kinds of things, that can help. Stillness in terms of many different, vagus nerve activation and all the things, right? Breath work and mindfulness and guided imagery and all of those things, right? It's really about doing the right things in the right order. But you do need to get to a place of stillness first before you can really get in, and both the emotional and the cognitive or the psychological, those are in the subconscious. And so you're really going to need to be able to get calm before you can do that kind of work. And then from that, the behaviors come much more easily once we can work on the core beliefs and the emotional. It's much easier then to align our behaviors and our patterns once we've done that internal work. So I always tell people it's bottom brain up, inside out. That's the order that you should work in. And really it comes with a decision. Too many times, like I said, stress is considered just an inconvenience or something that I can just push through. Nobody does yourself or anybody any favors by moving through this. There's a lot more freer experience of how to really live life when you're connected to yourself. And I don't mean that from a place of putting yourself above God. I mean getting in touch with who you were created to be and who He is, and not, living from, inside out rather than in a hypervigilant state focused on all of the things on the outside. So when we can really get to that still place, our creative brain comes back online. We're able to do the things that we were designed to do from a place of creativity creative energy and enthusiasm rather than drive and compulsion. When people say, there's just a constant restlessness and drive and I can't really, they feel like they're doing, they can be making much faster progress when they're able to really slow things down and get into that kind of rhythmic flow that we are supposed to be in, designed to be in, where we have healthy balance. And then it's like longevity too, right? So not only doing things from a better place now, but preparing ourselves to be healthy 5, 10, 15, 20 years, down the road. This is not about just how you feel today, but it's about who you are becoming based on how you want to be years down the road. So I hope that's helpful. Tune in for more videos. I do have a link below that has a link to my masterclass. If you want to understand more about my approach, listen to me explain my approach for getting people out of nervous system dysregulation and truly healing from the inside out. So hope that was helpful. See you in the next video. Bye.